What are healthy Sigewinne's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. I would like to kick things off by saying that much like Mizuki, Sigewinne is one of the lowest value units in the entire game. I like to start these videos by discussing the good aspects of the character, then delving into the bad. But I want you to keep in mind that this unit is generally really unworthy of your precious pulls. I will be shredding apart her kit later on. I would like to say that she's much more competent than Mizuki though, but let's be real, that's an extremely low bar to surpass. Just bear in mind that her pros don't really outweigh the cons. With that being said, Sigewinne does have some unique positive qualities surrounding her. For starters, she has a unique passive which is able to boost the damage of summons. Basically, creatures such as Furina's Three Little Guys or Fischl's Fancy Bird. You get the idea. This character was actually tailor-made to be a support for our beloved Lady Furina, so the synergy with her Three Little Guys checks out. This means that a taser team of Sigewinne, Lady Furina, Fischl, and Kazuha is honestly a really solid comp. She has good synergy with these strong units in this specific setup, and she's able to on-field very comfortably as the other units don't require field time. I prefer recommending Kazuha here, due to Anemo easily being able to swirl both Hydro and Electro at once while also being able to spread elemental application. However, C2 Shilonen's HP percent is pretty cool for this team, as it boosts both Sigewinne and Furina's personal damage numbers, so that's neat. The Melazine is able to effectively act as a driver for both of the eccentric ladies, with the team mostly relying on their damage output. This is a very unique ability which only Sigewinne has, and we have two extremely strong characters in the current meta who utilize summons. This gives her a unique archetype where she's able to function quite nicely. This also means that if we're ever to get more summons users in the future, Sigewinne will be able to buff them up too. This A1 gives her interesting utility beyond healing, which is genuinely applicable thanks to our dear Hydro Archon and Fischl being some darn good units. I'd like to touch more on her synergy with our beloved Lady Furina. Essentially, it's very clear to me that she was designed around her. Hydro Healer, therefore you're getting Hydro Resonance, which offers some more HP percent, consistent healing for fanfare generation purposes, and an A1 which buffs up the damage of her Three Little Guys. Considering that the Hydro Archon is the best character in the entire game, working well with her is indeed a very positive quality, because it means that at least no matter what, even if you genuinely cannot find a use for her elsewhere on your account, you can always rely on sticking her with Furina, because she was tailored around her. Does this sound like a big waste of a Furina when you could be using her with another character who could take much better advantage of her buffing? Yes, absolutely, no questions asked. But I'm assuming that if you're spending Primo Gems on Sigewinne at all, you probably care about the character a lot and want a place to use her in, so you'll always have a slot for her on your account one way or another. With that being said, I also consider this to be its own Furina playstyle. You can't really be a Furina main at C0 in the traditional sense, unless you choose to on-field her, regardless of how useless her C0 to 5 normal attacks are. She's always used as a support in most teams, focusing on dumping a buttload of damage bonus percent onto your teammates. However, that doesn't mean that you absolutely cannot be a Furina main. By this, I mean that there are ways that you can focus on the Hydro Archon's own personal damage specifically, as opposed to her supportive capabilities down at C0 to 5. That'd be through Furina driver teams. Both Klee and Sigewinne tend to this playstyle. Klee by applying a frick ton of pyros of a Furina's Three Little Guys can vape regardless of Hydro application inconsistencies, focusing mainly on the huge vapes that she's doing, or for Sigewinne buffing her Three Little Guys in the Pokemon team, with a Melazine, Hydro Archon, Fischl, and a Flex slot. Klee serves the driver purpose a whole lot better in my opinion, because big vapes go boom, and teams that focus on C0 to 5 Furina's damage specifically are never going to be as efficient as simply running her as a support for a really good main DPS. But if you care about that really specific Furina playstyle, then there you go. Sigewinne is able to provide it for you, even if Klee fills that same role but better. There's also the fact that the Melazine is able to be a pretty good mono Hydro teammate. Her direct competition in this regard would be Kokomi. They're both really good in this team, but feature slightly different playstyles, so it's a matter of choosing which one you prefer. Kokomi does on-field normal attacks to heal her party consistently while proccing Yelan or Xingqiu as she does so, whereas Sigewinne is off-field a lot more, front-loading in her 3-second burst during Xingqiu and Yelan's downtime because she's unable to proc them during it, then using her skill to heal, then she swap off. You then go to Yelan to normal attack with her until you can use Sigewinne again, as her A4 ramping damage bonus will be well used on herself to increase her dice damage. The main difference is that one team has a dedicated on-fielder, whereas Sigewinne's team is less simple as there's some timings you want to pay attention to, and you have a more makeshift on-fielder. I mean, with that being said, Mono Hydro still ends up being a very random nonsense go type of team. It's an excellent comfort team in my opinion, the type of comp that you play for not bothered with achieving a particularly high ceiling, in favor of having a pretty comfy time clearing. Sigewinne works very nicely as a slot in here. Yes, she can't proc Yelan or Xingqiu, but that's fine because she'll be off-field most of the time anyway. Her super short burst duration fits perfectly within Yelan's cooldown time, otherwise you're releasing her droplets for healing, and as you can imagine, this team's lovely for dealing with pyro shields and the like. Her C2 is also a really nice form of vertical investment into this team, reduction of Hydro Res by 35%. Nice. Kokomi's constellations sadly do very little to improve Monohydro's performance. Obviously, you want to get Furina, Shilunen, and Yelan cons before you even start to think about getting a C0 Sigewinne, but if you love this team archetype, it's a fun way to make it even better. The main drawback is that Kokomi exists, and she gets the job done just fine, or even Barbara if all you want is the experience of trying the core out, but in the long term, Sigewinne ends up being better for this team. It's not really a widely talked about comp, though it's one that I personally really enjoy using. It's super hard to mess up, even if you're sloppy with cooldown timings in the Sigewinne variant, so if you're a fan of this archetype, then the Melusine will serve you very nicely here. Unfortunately, the time has come to tear this character apart. For starters, having to be on field to do your main source of Hydro application and damage is just... it's certainly something. It completely locks her onto on-field based teams, as she is terrible as an off-field Hydro support. We have infinitely better options for those. You're 100% not going to be using her as a support for any sort of vape team. This is the real value killer for this character. She only has the Pokemon and Mono Hydro team, and you can replace her with literally any other driver. For example, using Raiden instead, and using Jean or Shilunen as your final slot to cover for fanfare generation. She is only on field for a very short amount of time in fairness, but imagine if more stock was put into your off-field playstyle, and if she's meant to be a good driver, why didn't they extend her field time a little bit more and hone in on it? Feels a bit counterintuitive in my opinion. Because nobody really competes for field time in her main teams, needing to on-field while having such poor off-field capabilities is kinda vile. And sure, while she can launch off some off-field bubbles as we've mentioned, we have so many fanfare-generating healers to choose from already, it's not like we need more. I mean, shoot. Barbara can genuinely do everything that you might want Sigewinne to potentially do. You miss out on the Pokemon A1, but that's not really that big of a deal to be honest. Don't get me wrong, it's a neat buff, but is it a buff neat enough to be worth an average of 140 to 150 limited pulls? Not really in my opinion. So what else is there? Hydro application? Yeah, no. She applies barely any meaningful amount of her element off field, doing so extremely slowly, and using her burst is just taking away field time from your main DPS. Most of the time, a character being Hydro can save him in the meta, and give him a position somewhere, because the element is just that good. But if you can't apply your vision at all, then it doesn't matter. Also, you may think that her personal damage is decent and a good reason to pull for her. Yeah, no, not at all. Because her personal damage is locked behind having her signature weapon. Otherwise, you're not doing any damage, buddy. This is because her burst gains a bunch of crit rate via the passive, while providing enough HP to allow you to build her with a crit circlet instead. If you don't have her main weapon, you can't do much of her damage potential, as she won't be critting. So, while her damage isn't too shabby considering the role she plays, you need another 5-star for that. Granted, the weapon banner is way less bad than it used to be, so this is negated quite a bit, but Sigewinne's already a niche choice, so pulling signature for such a niche choice is questionable. To be fair, I would say that you can make the argument for Sigewinne being best in slot and Furina Mono Hydro. In fact, if you have C2, then yes, she is. But if you're down to C0 with no Kokomi, then sadly it's a much closer gap, unless on-fielding your Yelan will be really beneficial to you. I don't want to say she has no best in slot because Mono Hydro exists, and the Pokemon team is not a bad team by any means, but she still ends up feeling so replaceable. Raiden is a much better driver in general, while still retaining a lot of ease of use. Stick any Pyro in front of Furina and Yelan, and they'll fry the opposition. So while Sigewinne absolutely has competent teams to speak of, they just can't compare to other options. Initially, I didn't have overly negative impressions of Sigewinne. I gave her some time to see what she'd end up becoming, and nothing really came of her to be honest. She will 100% work if you want her to. I think she has more kick cohesion than some other units that are deemed to be total bottom tier. I was fairly harsh on her, but that's because I want you to be 100% aware of what you're getting yourself into whenever you pull for her. Her teams are competent, and at least she's competitive with Kokomi. Plus, her C2 is nice. She's certainly better than Mizuki, I'll say that much. But that's kind of the absolute bar. I think she should have been a 4-star character. I don't really know why she was made as a limited 5-star in the first place, as when I saw her in the initial Fontaine trailers, I immediately assumed that she was going to be a 4-star in Riesle's banner. I feel like that would have been more successful than making her a random 5-star, releasing in the latter half of the Fontaine patch cycle. They sorta dumped her out of nowhere since they knew interest was low. I mean, shoot. She came right after Clorox Bleach's initial release and was debuting alongside Lady Furina's rerun. It's clear that even Hoyle themselves have zero confidence in this character. Definitely an underwhelming limited 5-star, but she'll get the job done if you're a fan of her. I do like that she's a Melusine, that's pretty neat. But what do you think about Sigewinne? Has she aged well in your opinion, or is she still as mid as ever? Let me know down below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week, every week on Saturday, starting from 3 p.m. UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Sigewinne's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and can someone please explain to me why this little bubble rabbit creature wanted to work in a freaking rusty jail? I still don't understand that.